Hello and welcome back to another EDH Deck Tech video. Today I'm going to be showing my Nezahal Primal Tide EDH deck. Nezahal here is a brand new Elder Dinosaur from our most recent set, and he is fantastic. I love this card. What he is here, we have a 7 mana 7/7 Elder Dinosaur, and I love the theme here, the Elder Dragons originally being 7/7s. He is the closest to on par for that comparison. He has a text box here of 4 different abilities. The first being that he cannot be countered. The second that we have no maximum hand size. The third being a variant of the enchantment Ristic Remora, where when an opponent casts a non-creature spell, we draw a card. And there's a fun theme here because he's very similar to the fish in the artwork and appearance. The last is a kind of a saver. We can discard 3 to exile him, and he is returned tapped at the next end step. So while we can save him from removal, he is essentially not able to block or return while we do that effect. Now, Nezahal here, when he was first spoiled, a few cards came to mind, and that has kind of turned this deck into an amalgamation, like a hybrid of a few different types of decks. The very first card that came to mind for me with Nezahal was actually the card Sunder. Now, Sunder isn't always the most fun cards to play against in EDH. It's essentially a 5 mana instant. Everybody bounces all of their lands to their hand. Most Sunder decks in EDH will do something like an end of turn Cyclonic Rift or Devastation Tide of some effect, and then you'll play this, and then when it goes to your turn, you drop an infinite hand size, like a Reliquary Tower. And in those decks, you'll usually see maybe something like Patron of the Moon or some other multicolored deck that can support this better. But for Nezahal, he gives us the infinite hand size. He gives us the ability to continually draw cards to help feed his own protection. And he himself is in a legitimate win condition when it literally only takes 3 hits to kill an opponent. That was the original idea, the very first thought that came to mind with Nezahal. And this is in the deck. Now, there's other things that kind of came too. Nezahal is 7 mana. That's a lot. And in this specific color, another effect we can use to help create mana, is Paradox Engine. And that is literally another third of this deck. This is a hybrid of a Paradox Engine deck, a Sunder deck, and also a Time Walk deck, as in it has a few extra turn spells, because attacking with a 7/7, you only have to do that 3 times before an opponent is dead. So that's the kind of the principle of the deck. Let's start by going through some of the Paradox Engine crap first, because that is the major core of the deck. And getting a 7 mana commander out fastest, and basically as fast as possible. It doesn't matter if you're at a few card disadvantage, because he is very good at helping you refill. Dumping mana rocks that may get removed isn't bad as long as he gets into play first. So let's go through the main parts of the deck. We'll start with the Paradox part first. So Paradox Engine, it's a commonly seen card nowadays. 5 mana legendary artifact, so don't try to clone it. When you cast a spell, you may untap all your non-land permanents. For example, if you had something that tapped for mana, like a Gilded Lotus, or something that tapped to draw you a card, like an Azami, then you can just start chaining things through your deck, and you usually create a high number of Storm, and you just win. This deck is not 100% focused on this, otherwise we'd probably play Azami as the commander. And if you like Paradox Engine decks, I have a few others in my channel, like the most recently posted Gwendolyn one, or Kess is the main commander of that one. But this is here basically to help create mana, and it can act as one of the win conditions with some of the other effects in the deck. With Paradox Engine, you have to have a high volume of mana rocks. This does not actually tap for mana, but it's good in mono blue, but we have all the generic ones. Now, there's 14 mana rocks here that tap for mana, so if we have Paradox Engine out, they untap. I am not 100% done with the deck. I am missing a Coldsteel Heart and a Star Compass, as those tap for blue mana. And having blue mana basically really does help the deck chain off faster. This, of course, is also not a very competitive deck, as you're seeing. In mana cost order, we don't have anything like a Mox Diamond or anything like that. But this is basically pretty good. The ratio, like a Grim Monolith, would also be helpful to help push the 7-drop commander out faster. This is Hedron Archive. It taps for 2. I can pay 2 to sack it and draw 2 cards. Of course, Gilded Lotus and a Dreamstone Hedron, which of course can also replace itself later in the game. We have a few mana doublers. There's also a High Tide in the deck. This is not actually necessary for the deck to win with. It is just a generically good card, and the deck does tend to create an absurd amount of mana already, so just an all-around good effect, and the Cage Stone to go with it. Now, there's two fun things you can do if you have enough mana going on with your Paradox Engine, and that's to tutor every card in your deck to your hand, because you can cast everything. If you have essentially 6 rocks out, or 6 mana creation worth of rocks out, and this in your Paradox Engine deck, you just draw your whole deck. You're going to not miss your lands, but you're going to tutor every card out of your deck. Very similarly, for 8, and if you can cast something from your hand, you can start putting things into play. The card I would first suggest getting with Planar Bridge is actually Otherworldly Atlas. Another option here, a more commonly seen one, would be Temple Bell, which combos with Mind Over Matter, which is another possibility if you like this type of deck. But this is one of my pet favorite cards, and in a Paradox Engine deck where you can keep tapping to put counters on it, this becomes your draw machine, and it's something you can get into play with like a Tezzeret or a spell like Whir of Invention. And now there is, of course, Isochron Scepter in here. There's the spell Dramatic Reversal, which I will show when we get to it, but that is another infinite untap trick, similar to Paradox Engine, so it's like a backup plan. But we also have, we're playing Mono Blue. We have 34 islands in this deck, so we of course have Vidalcan Shackles, which is just a sweet card in general. Let's go on through the other major parts of the deck. Now, in Paradox Engine decks, you typically expect a zombie to be the commander so you can draw. We don't have that. We have a 7 mana, sometimes a regular draw commander, so we have to have a very high complement of draw spells. Literally, the biggest chunk of this deck is mana rocks and draw spells, so we can just keep going through the deck faster. Paradoxical Outcome is fantastic if you already have the Paradox Engine in play. Even if you don't, this is great to save your artifacts from like a mass artifact sweeper like a Bane of Progress or something like that. Being an instant also helps. Impulse is basically in here. This could be cheaper cards like Ponder or Preordain, some shuffle effect, for example. Windfall is great when you dump out an early hand of mana rocks and you need a refill. We have Factor Fiction, of course, and a Treasure Cruise, and Dig Through Time. These two are the ones I was actually considering placing with like Ponder, Preordain, because earlier in the games these don't do much and we don't have a lot of counter magic to delve away. Flow of Ideas is also a somewhat whimsical card, as this deck can win very quickly. Depending on the amount of mana rocks that we see, we can sometimes go off as early as turn 3, which has happened. We've had a turn 2 Nezahal a few games, and that's always fun to help things too, but a 6-drop that counts our number of islands may not be the best for this deck. But we do have Recurring Insight, similar to Windfall. If we dump out a bunch of mana rocks, this is a great early game setup to basically just go off. And we have 3 Draw X spells. These are specifically good with the Paradox Engine. We want to hold these up until the end of turn when we're going to try to go off, so we just draw a bunch. Or we sink all of our mana into it and draw real deep, real fast. And Blue Suns and Stroke are actually alternate win conditions, as they can target an opponent. So you saw the Otherworldly Atlas, which forces all players to draw X. If we were to count the number of cards in our deck and paradox that thing up to that number, or thereabouts, we could then use these 2 cards to deck the opponents. And this one shuffles in, so we can keep dicking around and using these along with the Paradox Engine to deck everybody. Alternatively to just drawing cards, we do need to tutor some cards. Mystical Tutor can be used to get any of those big draw spells. This could be used to get Dramatic Reversal, which we're getting to, or even a Whir of Invention to help get our artifact. Muddle is one of 2 counter spells, I believe, in this deck. There's not a lot of protection, but this is used to tutor for 2 drops. For example, Isochron Scepter or Dramatic Reversal. This could also get like Pull from Tomorrow if we need a big X draw spell. We have Fabricate, which is a 3-drop sorcery, tutors an artifact to hand. And we have Whir of Invention, which is the best tutor in this deck. At the end of an opponent's turn, we can plug a Paradox Engine straight into play. And let's go on through the win condition spells, really. So there's the Sunder. Again, this is something that we want to end of an opponent's turn take advantage of, especially if we have some kind of wheel effect, like a windfall. The best plays are, of course, Cyclonic Rifting, and then Sunder, and then just make sure we have our Nezahal out, because we want an infinite hand size so we can slowly drop our own lands back. Dedicated Sunder decks are very obnoxious. They're also a little delicate. You may even see something like a Walking Atlas. It's a 2-drop 1/1 you can tap to put a land from your hand into play, so you're dumping your lands out faster. This specific deck does not need that, as our way of winning after Sunder is to kill with a 7/7, which only takes 3 turns, if we have one opponent, that is. Next to Sunder, we have Capsize. This is kind of the obvious win condition when it comes to Paradox Engine. If we have the ability to buy back, so essentially creating 6 mana, 2 of which is blue, with our Paradox, we can infinitely capsize every permanent our opponents control back to their hand. This usually can just causes a concession right on the spot, because this is annoying as hell. There is the Dramatic Reversal. This is in here specifically just for Icecrown Scepter. If you do not see the interaction here, we imprint this onto the Scepter. We can pay 2 to untap all of our non-land permanents, including the Scepter. So if we have a mana rock that taps for 3, or enough mana rocks that tap for 3 mana, we then have infinite colorless mana. We, of course, do want blue mana in here some way, so we can actually cast other spells. But that's a backup to Paradox Engine. It is just putting this on that and having about enough rocks to tap for 3. Then we have the Time Warp spells. Again, these are here because we have a 7-power commander, and it only takes 3 hits to kill somebody. So it's taking an extra turn. While the deck is not a Time Warp based deck, like my Jora deck is, for example, these are here to either help us get some extra lands into play, or just to kill with our 7/7 commander. Not a high volume of extra time spells, but enough that seems to be good for me. There's a few other cards. Let's just go through the generic cards first. So there's a few creatures in the deck, not a bunch, just the important ones. So again, we do need some islands in play. Our rocks are our primary win condition, technically, but having some islands does help us get there. So we have these 2 for ramp. We have a Trophy Mage, which can get us a lot of our rocks. This could get us anything from, like, I need a Coalition Relic for the deck, but this could get like a Darksteel Ingot. This could get Vidalcan Shackles. This can get a lot of our utility things that we need. Metamorph is here to copy basically any mana rock that we can, the best one, hopefully. The ideal dream is, of course, a Gilded Lotus, but if we need a Soul Ring or whatever, we got it. Drifter is here just to draw some cards, and Azami and Arcanus are here as draw toys to work with the Paradox Engine. Of course, Azami is the idle commander for that specific deck. Arcanus is very good, he just has to have haste. But yeah, they're just in the deck to act as kind of like removal bait, really, because people don't like seeing those cards. There's a few other instances of sorceries here. Let's go through. So High Tide is a random mana doubler, so we could do something very early in the game to generate enough mana to dump stuff much faster than we should be able to. We also have a single counter spell. This could be like a mana drain. If you want to drop your rocks for free and try to go off faster. We have Unsubstantiate, because this is a personal favorite card. It's just a way of delaying the opponents. Cyclonic Rift, Reality Shift, which is another thing you can do on your Icecrown Scepter, and Rite of Replication, which is a generic win war card. Sometimes our deck's goals are not really going to work out the best we need, so we have to have some extra trick, something else to do, and this is a good one. And there are a few other non-land permanents before we get to the lands, like the Phyrexian Metamorph. This is here to clone some kind of artifact ramp, like a Gilded Lotus or whatever we can. Tezzeret is the best planeswalker for this kind of deck. We can try to save him 1 turn, so he goes up to 5, so we can then put a Paradox Engine straight into play. Alternatively, he himself, his plussing ability is Mana Ramp. And, of course, this deck has 14 plus mana rocks and a whole bunch of other shit, so his ultimate is potentially a win condition. Like, that is just another way the deck tries to win. The other Planeswalker is actually a placeholder till I get another mana rock, but Tameo is my favorite blue Planeswalker. She's just here to help delay, kind of push us a little bit faster, and of course she's a severe threat. And past that, we are on to the lands. As I said, there are 34 basic islands. Riptide wasn't here from the last time I played Mono Blue. This is here just to save like a zombie. This could be something like an ancient tomb. Myriad Landscape helps us get some more islands, and Winding Canyons is here again as a leftover from my previous Mono Blue deck. This could be something like an Academy Ruins to help recur the Paradox engine. Recursion is something this deck may need. But of course, there's all my islands. I have the enough to make that panoramic view of all the Hedrons right there. But yeah, this is my Nezahal, the Primal Tide. I keep saying the Primal Tide. Nezahal, Primal Tide deck. This goofy little sea monster is fantastic. Very similar to my Itali, the Mono Red dinosaur deck. I'm very tempted to get like a little toy dinosaur, so when I attack with it, I can use that instead of the card. But yeah, I would highly recommend this guy. He is great in many different Mono Blue takes, be it if you're just doing a big blue fish, if you're drawing some kind of control effect because you want to use his draw, if you're using him as a singleton finisher because a 7/7 that you can protect by discard is also fantastic. Highly recommend. If you have any questions or ideas, I'm always welcome.